Hello again, I'm Robert Fitton, back for more, and I thank you for being back for more as I rank 140 albums from the year 1991. This is part 4. We have done the bad stuff, we have done the, I guess, not so bad stuff, we have done the meh, we've done the mid-level, and now we're up to like the, it's alright, I guess, yeah, kinda, whatever. Those albums. And yeah, it's the kind of thing where if you said, hey, can I put this on? And somebody would probably be like, yeah, that's fine, whatever, I don't care. It's those. It's nothing anybody's going to get really excited about. I mean, this is 140 albums, so the climb to get to the good stuff is a slow one, but we're almost there. And I thank you so much for continuing this journey with me. We are up to number 96, and that is the KLF with the White Room. Now, this is just a dance group. This is just club music, basically, from England. And they had a song called Justified and Ancient where they brought in Tammy Wynette right before she passed away, so she was able to get back on the scene and have another hit, so that was pretty cool. But that mix isn't even on here. This is the one without Tammy Wynette. There's different configurations of this album, like when you get the European dance stuff, there's usually, that's the way it is. It's different in the US than it is in the UK, than it is in Asia, than, you know, everybody's got different albums and different artwork and different song orders and mixes and everything, and the KLF is no exception. So this is the US version of this, and yeah, usually music like this is better suited as, you know, 12-inch singles with remixes and things. Most people don't listen to a whole album of a club band. But the thing about this group is the way that I found out about them, and it was on this community radio station in St. Louis called KDHX, which has become some sort of fiasco at this point. But back in 1991, and in the evening, they would just have people come on. No one's getting paid. It's community radio. It's all volunteer. So people would just come on with their favorite CDs or whatever and just play random songs. And, you know, it was 1991, so everybody's being alternative and everybody's trying to be more alternative than thou. And I remember somebody put on a song off this called Build a Fire. I had never heard of the KLF before, and I heard this song and I'm like, wow, what is this? This is pretty cool. This is different. It was this really atmospheric sounding song with these kind of like brooding like notes and everything. It's kind of like a David Lynch Twin Peaks kind of thing. It was doom 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 doom, and then this guy's on there. He's just basically talking through the whole thing, talking about, you know, gathered wood for the fire. I hum this tune to all the girls I've known. Should I care about the chances I'd blown? You know, it was like, and then this woman comes on and goes, build a fire, they're gonna build a fire. She's much more soulful sounding than I can sound. But that was the whole song, and I'm like, what? It really caught my interest, you know? I'm like, what is this? The DJ comes on after it and just says, hey, that was the KLF, and now we're going on to this thing. Didn't explain who the KLF was or anything about it. So I sought out this CD, and it turns out the rest of it's just a bunch of club music. They had a couple of hits, 3 a.m. Eternal. It's 3 a.m., you know, the KLF, and what is love, or what time is love, or something. I don't know, it's just basic club music. It sounds fine if you're in a club. But I really liked that Build a Fire. I wish they would have done more on there like that, but I kind of got misled, I feel, with that Build a Fire song. But anyway, I still remember that song after all these years. It still has that weird kind of atmospheric thing, especially on an album like this. It just sounds like it's coming on out of nowhere, and then it just goes away, and then we're back to club music. So the KLF, the White Room, I understand this group is all about shenanigans. Most people know the KLF for the Justified and Ancient thing with Tammy Wynette and their shenanigans. I know them for an obscure song that no one else even seems to recognize called Build a Fire. So there they are at number 96. Mr. Bungle's self-titled debut came out in 1991, and I've already reviewed this in a more full review on a previous video. That was back when I was doing I was taking suggestions, and people were suggesting albums for me to review, and this one was suggested, so I listened to it again after all those years and reviewed it. So I've actually heard this one more recently before I started this whole video about 1991 albums, and did a whole review. Here is the CD Pro that we played in college of Quote Unquote, which earlier was called Travolta, but John Travolta threatened to sue, or did sue, or something like that. You cannot use my name for a song title, which I didn't know you could sue for that, but apparently you can. And so they changed it to quote unquote. Now this is Mike Patton from Faith No More and his kind of side project. He had like several side projects. This was one of them. And this is the one where he just like cuts completely loose, does things that, you know, they probably wouldn't be able to do in a band as you know, popular as Faith No More, but still released on Warner Brothers. But this thing is just filled with, it's like they're trying to be as gross and nasty as possible, just over the top. You know, with porn sound bites, and actually sound bites from the movie Blue Velvet too, and just crazy carnival music throughout, like a crazy clown, like an insane clown made, well, not the Posse though, but like a crazy clown made you know, evil clown made an album, and this would be it. But yeah, just you know, just all kinds of sexual stuff. There's the Girls of Porn song, which is just filled with all kinds of sexual descriptions and whatever. This was the 90s. Everything had to be extreme. And this is an excellent example of just taking it way over the top. But listening to it now, it's quaint. It's kind of like, aw, they're trying to be as shocking as possible. Isn't that cute? That's how it comes across these days, because it's all been, you know, done. Except for the one guy, the part where somebody's taking a really sloppy shit and it's on the toilet and everything. I mean, that goes on for way too long, number one. And number two. But yeah, so, yeah, it's just, parts of it remind me of like, you know, like when 12-year-old kids get together and there's no grown-ups around. And so they just start saying as much profanity as they possibly can. And it's over the top. It's like overdone. That's kind of like parts of this are. There's some great musicians playing on this. So the music's actually really wildly varied, and, you know, some of it's kind of impressive. You know, they got some ska stuff going on, some like reggae. I don't remember for the reggae's ska. It's one of those two is in here. You know, nice horn stuff, nice keyboard stuff, and, you know, funk stuff. But it's the point here is to be as over the top as possible, as crazy, manic, dirty, wild out there as possible. So if that's what you're like, man, that sounds like something I got to check out, then yeah, you got to check out Mr. Bungle's self-titled album. Prong came out with this release, released on September 24th of 1991, a date that I will be mentioning a few times in this video series here. But this is Prove You Wrong, and I got familiar with these guys based on this CD, but I actually like their later couple a little more, especially, what's the one with the eyeball and the fork? Not Scorpions Blackout. It's an eyeball on newspaper and a fork. What's the name of that one? I can't even remember, but that's the one that I really liked from these guys. Saw these guys in concert at Mississippi Nights on that particular tour. This one is a little more, I don't know, a little more primitive sounding. There's not a lot of variety here. I do love the little guitar that, especially in the song Prove You Wrong. But you don't hear that a lot in these harder metal stuff from the early 90s, so that's a nice touch on here. They do the cover of the Stranglers' Get a Grip on Yourself. That's okay. And Unconditional was another one that we played on college radio all the time. The vocalist doesn't really change a lot. He kind of sings the same three notes throughout. It kind of gets a little redundant, but other than that, the music here is pretty good. But you know, it's basic, your basic sort of early 90s metal, getting ready for Metallica to switch things up here. They're pretty much on the verge on this album of the Metallica coming out and just changing everybody. But decent album from Prong. Like I said, Cleansing. That's the name of it, Cleansing. I appreciate Cleansing a lot more than this one, but this one's all right. This one's pretty cool. So yeah, Prong, Prove You Wrong. Bet on it. Did you realize that Joni Mitchell had an album out in 1991? Yeah, it was one of those ones that kind of came and went. It was the last one she did for Geffen, so kind of a lame duck one that they didn't try to promote at all or do anything with, but it got critical acclaim. Pretty good stuff called Long Ride Home. And the cover art is kind of odd. I first saw this and I thought it was Joni Mitchell in like a rear view mirror, but then when you look closely, it's got the bottom half of her face too. It's just like, I don't know, there's a silhouette of a guy and then she's like, her image is like against the mountain-esque side. I don't know what that's supposed to be, but anyway. So you have that. The very first song that comes on, I didn't really recognize her voice at all. One of the things I love about Joni Mitchell, aside from her writing, is I think she has one of the best voices in that whole singer-songwriter era. I just love the Joni Mitchell albums of 1971, 72, 73, those. And a lot of it has to do with her voice and the way she projects her poetry and all of that. But I did not recognize her voice at all in that first song. Now, on the second one, it starts to come a little more into focus. The second track called Passion Play, where she's all about, you know, who are you going to get to do the dirty work when the slaves have all been set free? She says that a lot. I don't think this, you know, the key there is the slaves aren't going to be set free, really, ever. And most of them won't ever realize that they're slaves to begin with. So that's how they're going to continue to do the dirty work. That's how that works with the Passion Play. But it would have been cool if she would have come up with that line in the end, but she did not. Third track is called Cherokee Louise, about an abusive relationship that her friend was in. Great lines in there. You know, you're going out, you get the third degree. You come back home, you get World War III, you know, or the Third World War or something like that. So, you know, that's the thing about Joni Mitchell. She's always, no matter what album it is, there's always little flashes of brilliance. Now, of course, when she was at her peak, the brilliance is all over the place, but there's still flashes of it here and there. The album has a definite light rock kind of production. It is not that beautiful, acoustic, warm, melodic stuff that she was putting out in the early 70s. Some of this sounds like precursor to like Lilith Fair type stuff, like you expect it to be almost like on a Sean Colvin album or something like that. So, you know, this is not up to the standards of her prime, but it's still a decent enough listen for Joni Mitchell fans. And it still, like I said, has little flashes of her brilliance show up every once in a while. There are certain songs that I just think are total filler in here as well, like the Daddy's Cadillac. That's, you know, it's just kind of there. There's some, you know, here and there kind of stuff. The one about aging with Nothing Can Be Done is just kind of, it's okay. The best track for me is called The Windfall. That's the one where she's singing about the maid that she had that tried to sue her. She is back to being the biting Joni Mitchell. You know, so that's really cool that that's included in here. And who else besides somebody like Joni Mitchell would be honest enough and forthright enough to talk about having a maid? A lot of these singer-songwriters don't want you to know that they have housekeepers and maids, but she just puts it all out there. I guess the maid sued her for something, and, you know, and she's talking about how, you know, it's all a crock, and, you know, you had this, and you had this, and you had this, and you just want something for nothing, and she puts it a lot more beautifully than I ever could. So yeah, check it out if you're a Joni Mitchell fan. If you're not a Joni Mitchell fan, this album is definitely not going to make you one. So at this point, you might be asking, why did I choose 1991, just as a random year to do 140 album reviews on? Well, 1991, there's about three reasons. First of all, 1991 was the year where everything kind of, there was a change of the guard. So you still had a lot of the glam metal trying in there. They were still somewhat popular. They were selling, you know, major labels. You also had the grunge thing coming in. So you had both of those sounds pretty much being prominent. You also had Britpop in there, a lot of great stuff coming from the UK that I was really into. That's, you know, the death metal, the extreme metal stuff was just crossing over and becoming like, you know, people were paying attention to it. You had all of that. You had just all kinds of great stuff just lining up. It was like the perfect alignment. Plus, I was the perfect age. It was right before I went into college radio, so I wasn't behind the scenes yet of radio, and it was certainly before I was working in commercial radio. So I was still that guy that was just a music fan who didn't know how the sausage was made. I was 18 and 19 years old, had a part-time job, first at Hardee's, then at Blockbuster Video, was still living with my parents at, you know, at 18, 19, so didn't have any bills to pay, had to pay for gas, had to pay for clothes sometimes, had to pay for CDs, and bought a bunch of VHS movies too. So bought a lot of CDs. And so that's part of it as well. But also on this channel, I don't talk a lot about 90s music because I'm usually talking about records, and my 90s music for the most part is all on CD. So I never really talk about the 90s, especially, you know, like 1991. So it's a good chance to just get it all out there in one video series. As a matter of fact, speaking of vinyl, I'm only showing 4 records in this entire video series out of 140 albums. So let's move on. Jethro Tull, Catfish Rising. That was the album that was out from those guys in 1991. It's pretty much an Ian Anderson project, as Jethro Tull usually is. They're back, though, with more of a rock-oriented sound than they had before, just kind of like straight-ahead rock. There's a little bit of blues rock in there on some of the tracks as well. Of course, you got the flute going on, but the keyboards, if they're in a song at all, they're way in the background. Some of the lyrics are pretty interesting. Nice little story being told in White Innocence, where the young girl, instead of, what would have happened in the 70s in a rock song, she just gets out of the car and goes away. Kind of like, I guess it is like a 70s. It's a Chevy van from Sammy John's, but of course they don't do anything, I guess, because, we're in the 90s now. You don't do that kind of thing. But, yeah, so Jethro Tull, Catfish Rising is pretty much it's got a very polished sound. It's got a very... just kind of conventional mix. Everything is pretty much mixed the same. There's no nice little highlights of, oh wow, something flies out of the left channel, or none of that. It's a very time-keeping drumming. There's not a lot of flair and bombast with the drumming. It's just kind of like keeping time. And so it is kind of like the same all the way through. I don't know if we need 14 tracks of this, but it's 1991, so you got to have the longer albums, but it's decent, I guess. It's not going to make any new Jethro Tull fans. Old Jethro Tull fans are going to go for the older stuff, but if you've listened to Aqualung 300 times and you want to hear some other Jethro Tull from later on, Catfish Rising is probably better than a lot of the other stuff they were doing in the late 80s and in the 90s. So it's decent. That's pretty much what I can say about it. First track on there, This Is Not Love. Probably the highlight. Oh yeah, it's a countdown of 140 albums from 1991. And we are up to John Mellencamp's Whenever We Wanted. This one actually got him back on MTV, back on rock radio with some legitimate hits. Last couple of albums didn't do as well. But he's back to the basics on this one, back to just a general rock and roll. And there's some great tunes on here that did become singles. I always liked Again Tonight, which is the final track on here. Now More Than Ever, that's a great message in that song, and a great guitar riff in that as well. Get a Leg Up was the other one. That's just John Mellencamp going back to his early days, just singing about sex, basically. But there's some other cool stuff on here too. There's basically a lot of general stuff. I Ain't Ever Satisfied. You get the whiny John Mellencamp, I ain't never said it. Well, maybe, you're a rock star, so get over it. I always wanted to tell him, you're a rock star, man. You're living people's dreams. Quit the bitching. But yeah, so the thing about this is a lot of the stuff that isn't hit singles is just kind of, it's typical. So I don't know how necessary this album is for your collection. That's why it's kind of lower on the thing, because you can get the 3 singles on various compilations, Words and Music. They're all 3 on that one. The Best That I Could Do, I'm pretty sure they're on that one as well. But yeah, so you can get these on compilations, and the rest of the album is just kind of not, it's inessential, basically. And there's the track on here called You're So Tough. I think that's what it is, or They're So Tough, where he just decides to throw out a racial slur. Yes, that one. Just throw it out there in 1991. So I don't know what it is with these guys from Indiana, but he's doing that on the same album where he's singing What the World Needs Now Is Love. Not just a slogan, what the world needs love. Now more than ever, I can't stand it. Come on, what the world needs is love. And then he decides to do the racial stuff. So yeah, just get the singles on a compilation. Not really completely essential John Mellencamp album, Whenever We Wanted. So that's the countdown of 140 albums from 1991. Again, not necessarily the best 140 albums, just the 140 albums I listened to, and I'm ranking them, and we are up to the visceral experience that is Fugazi's Steady Diet of Nothing. And this one is, this is the kind of thing that I was much more into when I was 18 than I am now. Just a lot of screaming and just bashing it out. I do like the songs that are a little more melodic. They do have some definite highlights on here. Latin Rhythms is the one where it kind of changes up the sound a little bit. All right, this is a little more pleasing to my fully grown old man ears at this point. But 2 vocalists, I definitely prefer one over the other. Not going to say which one. I definitely prefer the Fugazi Repeater album over this one, but this one's all right. But like I said, just a lot of angst, a lot of yelling, a A lot of just bashing it out, and I do like the songs where there's a little more fully realized melody going on, and that happens a lot, I think, more in the second half of the album than the first half. The very final track on here, Keep Your Eyes Open, is definitely a highlight. The instrumental track, where there's no vocals, the half of the title called Steady Diet, is actually one of my favorites on here as well. The album starts off with this song called No Exit, which sounds like somebody just learned the word sympathetic and just wants to repeat it over and over again. But yeah, so got its high points, got its points that are definitely made for the teenage angst. Overall, I still like it. Don't love it, but it is Fugazi. So, you know, Fugazi and Steady Died of Nothing is kind of why it ends up right here in the ranking. Firehose is the band that put out the album Flyin' the Flannel in 1991. And this would be their second to last album. Of course, Mike Watt, who's involved in this, goes on to do many other projects, many other bands. He is just, I don't know how many bands and projects this guy's involved in, but Firehose was one of those. He, of course, from the Minutemen. And Firehose has kind of a different sound. You know, being he's the bassist, the emphasis kind of is on the bass and the drums a lot. Very well recorded, very well produced, so it makes it kind of a different sound when that's the emphasis. The vocals and the song structure's not quite up to the par of the bass and the drums and, you know, that whole rhythm section part. There is a, you know, especially the vocal. I'm not a big fan of the vocals. Mike Watt has a couple songs. He shares the vocals with Ed Crawford. He does the lion's share of them. And yeah, the songs, some of them sound kind of half-baked. They got that 90s quirkiness going on, but there are certain nice tunes here and there, and like I said, the production is great, the drums sound great, the bass is doing different things in different songs because it's Mike Watt, it's his baby, and he would go on to do other things. I'm trying to show as much vinyl as I have from I don't have a lot of 90s vinyl, but he goes on to have a solo career as well after this with this album, which has all kinds of different, I mean, that lists all the guests on here. The big song we used to play out this was what featured Eddie Vedder and was called Against the 70s. But anyway, yeah, Firehose, Flyin' the Flannel. Just not a lot to say because there aren't a lot of standout moments like, oh my God, this one song blows me away, or, you know, this one song has this unique, you know, arrangement or whatever, or oh my God, the lyrics in this song are hilarious, or the lyrics in this song are thought-provoking. There's not a lot of that. But if you want something that's got some bass and drums going on and it's a little more emphasis on that and some 90s quirkiness, then definitely check out Flyin' the Flannel from Firehose. Metal Church got a lot of acclaim for their 1991 album called The Human Factor, and a lot of great guitar work in this, very, very energetic. It's very organic sounding. There's not a lot of nonsense going on. The lyrics, though, are pretty much, they're kind of like Anthrax. They're taking on a lot of social issues, talking about some pretty heavy stuff in here. It's not just your usual, like, you know, kind of ethereal metal lyrics, or it's certainly not hair band lyrics about partying and sex and stuff like that. And right off the bat, the title track comes on, and they're going up against music sampling and how it doesn't contain the human factor, kind of mindless, you know, drum machines and stuff like that, which I'm all about taking on that, especially in 1991. I was like ready for more after I heard that song. And then they take on poverty with the next song talking about the ills of poverty and, you know, having to beg out on the street and getting told to F off and all that at the end of the song. And, you know, they take on the whole heavy metal controversy with the kids themselves based on, you know, supposedly based on heavy metal lyrics and how that's all bullshit. And, you know, you gotta take care of your kids. Don't blame metal bands and whatever. And they just right out front with it. So a lot of really serious issues they tackle here. Unfortunately, track 3, called The Final Word, they do a lot of, like, you know, standing up for stuff and pushing back and, you know, protesting whatever. And then they have a song that called, like I said, The Final Word, that seems to be anti-protest. It's very jingoistic. We don't like your protesting and your, you know, activism and whatever. It's like, you just spent the last 3 songs protesting things. What? It's like they're trying to go for all audience. Like, oh, we want everybody to buy our album. Doesn't matter what side you're on. it was kind of weird that just popped up, and it's like, okay, well, I don't know where these guys are coming from now. So, and they even say something like, you know, if you don't like this country, we'll buy your ticket to go elsewhere. It's like, dude, you better, I mean, come on now. I'm sure there are all kinds of people that will call your bluff on that one. Be like, yeah, can I take my girlfriend or boyfriend or husband or wife or kids? Can we all go? Because how many tickets you got there? How much of an endless pot of money do you have to start doling out tickets to Europe and other places? You know, come on now. I'll buy your ticket. But that was really kind of a weird, you know, they do have, like I said, great guitar work, especially the end though. Some really meaty stuff on songs like Betrayed, and then the final track, the fight song, that smoked. That whole like third song though just really threw me off. It's like, where, huh? And so, but yeah, a lot, like I said, tackling big issues, and really a lot more going on here than just your average metal lyrics, but wildly uneven with their lyrical approach. So I'm putting them right here in the ranking. Morbid Angel put out Blessed Are the Sick in 1991. I've said it a couple of times, or maybe I'll say it a couple more, but I got introduced to the extreme metal about 93, a couple years after these albums were out. But Morbid Angel was the one where I thought it was a little less interesting than some of the other ones. I'm definitely a bigger fan of stuff like Entombed's Clandestine, which I'll talk about later in the series. But this one is kind of like just a lot of the drums, you know, just seemingly randomly, just random guitar wailing, a little bit of the horse neighing guitar in there every once in a while, which I just find annoying. And, you know, it's got the guttural vocals. It's not extreme with it, but it's mid-level guttural kind of vocals. But Morbid Angel, I know that they are really well liked by a lot of people, but I just kind of find them, you know, kind of average. I'm not as big of a fan as a lot of people. There are some nice moments on here, and I do like the fact that they're not afraid to get a little bit campy, I guess I'll say, with like things like chamber organ intros on the song Doomsday Celebration. They've got a flute solo starting off one of the songs, and they of course have an acoustic piece in there called Desolate Ways, where it's just an acoustic guitar. They settle things down, you know, they got some variety in their sound. I remember the first time I heard this was with some friends, and that acoustic piece, we didn't realize it was its own song. We thought it was just an intro to something, and every time the guitar would be like, we're like, oh, here it is, it's going to kick in, and it doesn't. It just that like 4 times, or we kept thinking it was going to kick into something. It eventually kicks into the next track, is what it kicks into with a drum intro. But yeah, there's interesting stuff on here. Barnstorm is the one, like track 2, where it has this cool little guitar. The music just stops with this cool little guitar, like. So that's pretty cool. But the highlights on here don't come more until almost the end of the album. Unholy Blasphemous and The Ancient Ones are probably my 2 favorite tracks on here. That's the one where they stop with the time signature changing and the random wailing and stuff and just let it rip. And that's my favorite kind of extreme metal, is when they get in the groove and they just fly, you know, and they don't really start doing that until towards, well, like I said, more towards the end of the album. But it's an okay one. There's just extreme metal that I like a lot more than Morbid Angel. And so, yeah, that's why this one appears here in the ranking. Next up is a band I had forgotten all about, Mary's Danish, and their album called Circa. And yeah, this is a fun one. All kinds of different sounds in here. They're just basically throwing a lot of stuff against the wall. They got different sounds going on, different genres moving in and out, some on the top of each other during a song, so it's pretty fun stuff. Great line in the song Bombshell. I try to prove them wrong, I end up proving them right all the time. I just thought that was really clever. So yeah, they've got, you know, like I said, all kinds of musical styles going on here. We could probably do without the slap bass though. Not a big fan of slap bass. And it's here a few times. They got the metal parody that comes on for like a minute and a half where they just rock out just to prove they can, called Mr. Flusack. They've got, but a lot of the guitar, a lot sounds like that swirly kind of early 90s guitar where, you know, like EMF's Unbelievable, that guitar solo. A lot of that guitar sound is in here too, which of course I'll be talking about the EMF album coming up in just a bit. But first, this one from Mary's Danish. And yeah, they got great song titles in here too, like Axl Rose's Love, Killing Thrills in the Bathroom. You got These Are All the Shapes Nevada Could Have Been. So I like the song titles. Not big on the Foxy Lady cover. We don't need that. They don't do that song any justice at all. Just skip right over that one. And you can afford to do that since this has 17 songs on it. So they take up the, it's an hour-long album, so we can just go ahead and lose the Foxy Lady and still have plenty to listen to from Mary's Danish. Like I said, really fun stuff. And a lot of different styles. It's that quirky early 90s alternative thing where everybody's just, throwing it all out there and being wild. And, here's a minute and a half of metal. Here's some of this. Here's a Jimi Hendrix cover. Here's a weird song title. Here's a really fun song, that kind of thing. With the two female lead singers, too. Sounding somewhat harmonious together. Somewhat. So here's a little backstage secret. I'm recording these videos in segments. That's why there's an edit after every review. I listen to a few albums and then I do a few reviews. And I don't really know what order they're going into until the very end when I put the whole series together. So I don't know if I've shown any vinyl records yet, but I do know that I will only have 4 to show in this entire video series. And this is one of them, Richard Thompson and Rumor and Sigh. Richard Thompson from Fairport Convention, also probably known as more popular as being a part of the duo Richard and Linda Thompson. They had the albums Shoot Out the Lights and I Want to See the Bright Lights Tonight, and then Shoot Them Out, apparently. I'm not a big fan of those albums, especially I Want to See the Bright Lights Tonight. I just heard that one again earlier this year and was just kind of like, nah, not for me. But both of those, very much critically acclaimed. He is a critic's darling. And this album is interesting. It's definitely got a lot of humor in it. Probably should have been called Humor and Sigh. But yeah, he's an English guy who kind of drifts off into sort of like singing like an Irish, drinking music every once in a while with his cadence. But I really like him more when he's more acidic and kind of smart aleck with his humor. He's got some nice tunes on here. The very first one, Read About Love, is great with the lyrics. That's what he's all about, is his lyrics to me. Not lyrics to me, but that's what he's great to me about, is his lyrics. I'll put it that way. I Feel So Good was kind of a minor hit for a little while back in 1991. That is on here as well. Much more of, like I said, a fan of his kind of smart alecky, observational humor. More than I am when he gets really acoustic and attempts to be, really soulful. For instance, Why Must I Plead is not one of my favorites on here. He does have Psycho Street at the very end, which is kind of psycho. Got a lot of strange things happening in that song. So it's a kind of an emotional roller coaster of an album here, where you're just going from the pleading, soulful attempts to back to the quirky kind of observational humor to the just craziness, and then you get a little bit of pub drinking music to go with all of it. He does have an interesting guitar playing style. If you'll notice on the drawing here, he actually plays with his left hand backwards. So that's interesting. Richard Thompson, great album to pull out every once in a great while, just kind of throw on and give a nice listen, get reminded of some of the better tunes on here. Rumor and Sigh, again, one of 4 vinyl albums that I will be showing during my 1991 video series. Through all these years, I never realized that Seal's debut album was produced by Trevor Horn. Did not know that until just recently. But yeah, check that out all the way through. I just heard the 2 big songs, Crazy and Killer. And The Beginning, I think I had heard that before too. That's the one that starts it off. It's called The Beginning. That's the one where it's like, music takes you round and round and round and round. Hold on to your love. Like, I've been getting groped on the dance floor. Everybody's experienced that, I'm sure. That's what that song's about. But this album has it starts off with this very breezy kind of disco feel to it, like nouveau disco that was coming around in 91 in the clubs, and just a real kind of easygoing type of thing. And it just gets easier and easier and easier as the album goes on, until you finally drifted off into this peaceful slumber by the 8-minute closing track. It's that kind of thing. He's got a really soothing voice, of course. The music is very soothing. It starts off, like I said, a little more clubby, and then just kind of goes more light rock, and then you're kind of drifted off into almost like a new age type of thing, and it's just kind of very pleasant. A very pleasant listen from Seal. You know, like big hits like Crazy, which I never really understood the lyrics to that. One part's about, you know, two guys shooting each other or something, and they used to be friends in school, and we're never going to survive unless we all get a little crazy. Well, that already sounds crazy to me, and apparently one of those guys at least didn't survive, so that doesn't really fit into that. And I'm not into that anyway. I think we've gone quite crazy enough. Thank you very much. I think we need to try to get back in touch with sanity a little bit. Spoiler alert, most likely that's not going to happen, and we're going to ramp up the crazy about 25-fold, so get ready for that. But yeah, we're never going to survive unless we get a little crazy. That's a little naive. It's what that is. Also, the other big song was Killer, which is interesting because if you try to look up that song, you actually have to look up Seal Killer, which is probably not a thing you want to Google. Just a FYI there. But yeah, breezy, easygoing, very soothing voice. Not a lot of, don't pay a lot of attention to the lyrics. There aren't a lot of them in some songs anyway. So yeah, it's decent for those type of conditions. And now we're up to the album Pretty on the Inside from Hole. That is the Hole that features Courtney Love on vocals. This was released before they moved over to DGC and they blew up with that Live Through This album, and then of course Celebrity Skin after that. This was on Caroline Records. I got this when she had just come out, when they had just come out with Live Through This, and I picked this up. And this is much more punky, kind of abrasive, kind of low, not really lo-fi, but definitely not anywhere near as polished as those other two albums. They are just bashing it out, very aggressive. Obviously, it's Hole, it's Courtney Love and friends. And, you know, the very first song is called Teenage Whore, and she comes on right away. When I was a teenage whore, my mom said, "Why do you do that for? We give you everything. Why do you want more?" You know, it's that kind of thing. You know, it's not really the Riot Girls stuff because it's more of like a slower, you know, it's not this really fast stuff. But yeah, so, it's very abrasive, obviously. You know, you probably know that just like it's Courtney Love. So, yeah, but it was great to hear. I hadn't heard this in years and years and years, and it's just been back there in the CDs, and pulled this out and gave it another listen. It took me right back to 1994 or whenever I first heard it. But yeah, I forgot all the weird stuff on here. Like there's one song called Starbelly, where the beginning of it, they're just totally doing the riff to Cinnamon Girl from Neil Young, and then out of nowhere, somebody's like got a stereo or boombox or something playing like Rhiannon from Stevie Nicks. Now, of course, Hole would later on cover Gold Dust Woman from the Crow 2 soundtrack. Not the Crow, you know, the remake, the Crow 2, what was it called? City of Angels or something like that? But yeah, it had a big soundtrack. That was on there. And they're ripping off like Bauhaus and the Mrs. Jones song, singing about Madonna and the Baby Doll song about, yeah, I won't even get into that. But yeah, just going off on everybody. Screaming her way through the whole thing. Just like I said, just pissed off. Very, very 90s. Very, very much that 90s angst. If you're looking for that and, you know, Live Through This and Celebrity Skin, just too polished for you, check out Pretty on the Inside from Hole. So 1991 is the year that Great White put out their album Hooked, and one of the very first things you hear when you start the album, a little guitar riff kind of reminding you of maybe some other Great White big songs, and then the lead singer Jack Russell comes on and says, "Sound familiar?" It's like, yeah, it does sound familiar. The whole thing sounds familiar. This is the same old shit. Actually, it's not quite as metal, I guess, or as hard as some of their previous albums. They're kind of mellowed out a little bit on this one. And yes, I am showing the original album artwork. YouTube better not say anything because YouTube themselves has this artwork when you stream this album. So I don't even want to hear it. But the artwork was later changed so that the woman is like submerged in water and you just see the hook and her, you know, like from her neck up. Which, you know, I mean, just caught a woman out of the water like a fish and hoisted her up there. She's not even a mermaid. Anyway, Great White and Hooked. You know, it's got tracks on there that, you know, didn't age well, like the original Queen of Sheba, where it's like, I'm going to tell you how it's going to be. You're going to give all your love to me. And that's, whatever your opinion is on that, I don't care. You're giving your love to me. It's how it is. Now take them off. You know, so it's that kind of attitude in the lyrics, but you can expect that of music that's kind of fading out of fashion at this point. And poor Great White, they're doing that. The song Desert Moon was the single. You don't get to that until almost the end of the album, but it is definitely a fun standout track on here. There are tracks that are that just rock out, a couple of those, a few that are just very mid-level and kind of trying to recapture Once Bitten, Twice Shy. Like I said, with that very first guitar hook and the guy going, "Hey, sound familiar?" So there's that, and a few ballads on here as well. Expert band, you know, the band is tight. The recording is expertly done. There's just not a lot to work with here. That's the thing. Not a lot to work with. They're kind of like coasting a little bit, I think, on this one. But they still sound tight. They still sound like a band that knows what they're doing. You know, and of course, you know, later on the band has a tragedy with the concert fire and everything that killed like 100 people. That was awful. I don't think they ever recovered from that. They could not be expected to, obviously. I don't want to bring everybody down, but yeah, that's part of Great White's history, unfortunately. I think it was actually the song Desert Moon that they were performing when that tragedy happened. But yeah, Great White, back then though, 87, 89, you know, Once Bitten album, Twice Shy album, they were in their prime. Here, coasting a little bit, and if you're a band like this, 1991 is not a year when you want to coast. You want to get out there and give it your last, you know, chance here, because this is probably going to be pretty much it. And, you know, it was for these guys. They released a few more albums, but their glory days were, you know, the first couple. So yeah, Hooked from Great White. If you like Great White, you never heard this album, you probably like it. Just don't expect the hard rock and stuff of some of their first ones, but they still have the power ballads going on. Still a very tight band. And yeah, there's some things in here it's still to like, and that's why it's kind of like in this position on the countdown. So that does it for part 4. We are slowly getting to the top, and I thank you so much for taking this journey with me. I know it's a very long journey, but hopefully we'll start getting to the better stuff, and you'll be like, oh yeah, now there's an album I love. There's another album I love. Yes, I agree. This should be way up here. Yes, wait a minute, what's this album doing up here? This album sucked. You'll probably be like that. I'm sure I've put some of your favorites at the bottom. People are coming out of the woodwork in the comments, especially the Big Audio Dynamite fans. Didn't see that coming, but yeah, that's not a very good album. But yeah, so hopefully you'll continue with me on my journey. It took a lot of effort, a lot of listening to do this, but I wanted to just do something completely over the top and boisterous for the end of the year, which is becoming the beginning of the next year. This is going way into January. So thank you so much again for watching. And hopefully you will tune in for the next part of 140 albums ranked from the year 1991. I'm Robert Fitton. Hopefully I will talk to you again soon.